Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and in our last video, we got our stats organized into a single script, which has made things a lot easier to organize. However, we can't yet see those while playing the game. So in this video, we're gonna set up the UI, which in our final video, will hook up so that we can pause the game with a button press, bring up our menu, and see all of our stats. Let's get started. So, first thing that we're gonna have to do is actually set up our UI. So we're gonna create a UI canvas, and I'm just gonna call this one Stats Canvas. Before we go any further, I'm just gonna zoom in on the canvas scaler, which we will set to scale with screen size. We wanna make sure our reference resolution is 1920 by 1080, which if you just click over on your game menu, should match the resolution there. Next up, I'm just gonna double click my player UI to zoom out and see my entire canvas. And then on my stats canvas, we're gonna right click, go to UI, and we're gonna add an image. I'm gonna call this one Stats Panel, and I'm gonna be using the Tiny Swords pack, and here I'm gonna use Banner Vertical as my background, but you can use whichever image you like. You'll notice mine's quite small. I'm actually gonna upgrade it to about 1200 by 1200. This is looking okay, except that when I zoom in, you can see that the pixels don't quite match my other one. And so I'm just gonna click on the core image itself, and in pixels per unit, I wanna make sure that it matches those of my other UI, which was set to 64. I'll apply those changes, which actually in this case don't change a lot. In filter mode, I wanna move to point no filter, and when I apply that, it will fix the blur problem we've been having. However, my pixels are still not quite the right size. To fix this, I'm gonna head into my sprite editor and use Unity's 9 slicing. Here we just take this green box around the outside and bring it in so that anything along the outside that we don't want getting stretched will be preserved. Well, we'll just stretch whatever is on the inside of the box. Now, if I click on my stats panel, I can change the image type to sliced, and at first that's gonna make the pixels really tiny. But now we have control over their size by going to this pixels per unit slot here. I'm gonna set mine to 0.5, which is looking much nicer. This one, I'm just gonna move it over and up a little bit so that I get it in about the right place. And on second thought, I'm gonna change my pixels per unit to more like 0.35, which I think matches my other UI nicer. All right, now we'll click on Stats UI. We're gonna go to UI and add another image. This one's gonna be our title banner. And for this, I'm actually gonna go into ribbons, and I'm gonna use the blue ribbon 3 slides. It's already at 64, and it looks like I already set this one to point no filter. I don't think we need to 9 slice this as it shows up nicely naturally. And so we can put this into place. For this one, I'm gonna go with about 1200 by 250, and that looks pretty good. Now we'll click on my stats panel. I'm just gonna move the whole thing over a tiny bit, and let's rename our banner to be banner. Next up, we're gonna click on the banner, go to UI Text Mesh Pro. If you don't already have this downloaded, you can head to Window, Package Manager. Make sure you're looking at packages in the Unity registry, and type in Text Mesh Pro and then install. Your install button should show up either in the bottom right or top right, depending on which version you're using. From here, I'm just gonna type in stats, head over to my anchor presets. It's already centered, which is gonna work nicely, but I actually want to stretch this. I believe it's Alt on PC or Option on Mac, and let's stretch it to fill the entire area. Of course, we don't want our stats showing up over the edge of the ribbon, so we'll just drag the corners in a little bit and make the margins a little smaller on the shape, but now it's anchored to our ribbon, so as we move the ribbon around, it will move nicely with it. From here, you can sort of choose what you want it to look like. I'm gonna use Banger's font, change my size, center it, and then I'm also just gonna make sure that it matches my other text by changing the vertex and giving it a little bit of a white outline. Things are starting to look pretty good. All right, I'd like to add a little bit of a background for our text to appear on. So here I'm just going to go into our stats panel, add a UI image. For this, I'm gonna go back in my banners folder and use the carved 9 slides, which I think makes a nice background. Don't forget to take your image. I'll set my pixels per unit for the image, change it to point no filter, and I'm also going to head into the sprite editor where we can 9 slice this one, preserving the outer edges. With that done, we can apply those changes and exit the sprite editor. Now we'll click on our text panel. I'm just gonna size this up. We're gonna go with 600 by 600. Actually, that seems just a little too big. Let's make it 500. So next I'd like to create some slots so that we can put each stat name and its value into the slot. So I'm going to create a new UI image, call this one stat slot. For this one, I'm going to go to UI buttons, and we'll add the buttons 9 slides. I like the blue one. As with all the others, we'll set our pixels per unit, our filter mode, Apply those and then head into the sprite editor to slice this one up to preserve our edges. I'll click Apply, go to our stats slot, and make sure that the image type is sliced. From this point, we're just going to size it up. I'm going to go with 250 by 100. That way we can put two stats side by side and then just scale them down the page. That's looking pretty good. For pixels per unit, I think I'm just going to leave this one at 1 as that looks about right. Now in each slot, I'm going to right click because we want to have some text, so we'll add Text Mesh Pro. I'm going to call this one Stat Text. And while this will be generated in our code, I'm just going to write in strength with a value of 0 so that we can get the sizing right. Here I want to stretch it so that it fills the whole space, holding down Option on Mac or Alt on PC and clicking Stretch. I'll then try out some margins. 25 on each spot seems about right to me. And now we can set it up however we want it to look. I'm going to go with bangers once more, and then just set my color and other things to whatever suits you. Now what we're going to do from here is make this into a prefab. So let's head to our Assets folder where we can create a new folder called Prefabs. If you haven't used prefabs before, the way they work is we can drag objects down here, they'll turn blue, and now we've got this static sort of stats slot down here in our assets folder, and anytime we want to change them, we can make a change to this prefab and then apply all of those changes to all the stat slots in our game. It saves us having to make edits to 15 different stat slots every time we want to change something. From here, I'm going to go back up to my text panel, and I'm just going to add something called a grid layout group. This allows me to set our stat slots into a grid and control them from one spot. Of course, that's going to mess up the sizes, so let's go to cell size and just set it back up to what we had. I think I'm going to go 300 actually by 100. Now by hitting Command D, I can duplicate these slots, and you can see what it's going to look like once we've got a bunch in there. All right, so with this second video complete, we've now got our stat system, we've got a nice looking UI, and we're ready to code the two so that they work together. We'll get there in the next video. I hope to see you then. Until that time, this is Matt with Night Run Studio. Cheers.